I am Yudit Sidikman, one of the founders of Halev and the CEO. And I look forward to spending this next hour with you. There'll be questions and answers at the end. If you write them in the chat, we will be able to answer you. So we've spent the day hearing a lot about violence towards children. It is an epidemic. The UNICEF 2017 report, A Familiar Face, Violence in the Lives of Children and Adolescents, reminds us that children experience violence across all stages of childhood in diverse settings and often at the hands of the trusted individuals with whom they interact on a daily basis. Just to highlight one point, in 38 low and middle income countries, close to 17 million, oh, why is it not letting me click? Yes, sorry, we gotta fix the PowerPoint, understanding, okay. There we go, fantastic. In 38 low, according to this report, in 38 low and middle income countries, close to 17 million adult women reported having experienced forced sex in childhood. In 28 countries in Europe, around 2.5 million young women report experiences of contact and non-contact forms of sexual violence before the age of 15. These are not statistics that we can just slide by. In Israel, it's not much better. Recently, the University of Haifa came out with a report on violence against children and teens, where we see clearly that this is happening both to boys and girls. Sexual assault reported by boys and girls is, again, 1 in 5. So, you know, the feeling that it happens in countries in lower developed areas, but not here, is just not true. And it's time to deal with it. The World Health Organization's report, INSPIRE, their 2016 report, talks about 7 strategies for ending violence against children. There seems to be, to me, there seems to be something critical missing. In their report, it says, dealing with violence against children therefore involves implementing measures to, and let's see what their measures are, create safe, sustainable, and nurturing family environments, and provide specialized help and support for families at risk of violence. Great. Modify unsafe environments through physical changes, wonderful. Reduce risk factors in public spaces, schools, places where young people gather to reduce the threat of violence. Address gender inequities in relationships, the home, school, the workplace, etc. Change the cultural attitudes and practices that support the use of violence. Ensure legal frameworks that prohibit all forms of violence against children and limit youth access to harmful products such as alcohol and firearms. That's also wonderful. Provide access to quality response services for children affected by violence. Eliminate the culture, social, and economic inequalities that contribute to violence. Close the wealth gap and ensure equitable access to goods, services, and opportunities. And coordinate the actions of the multiple sectors that have a role to play in preventing and responding to violence against children. But there's something missing. You know, this is all about the environment. It doesn't in any way address violence as it's happening. What are kids supposed to do? What are children supposed to do when they meet violence? So yeah, we want to change the communities and we want to change how people behave towards children, and that's all very important, and make safe spaces for them. But you know, I'm not 100% sure that we'll ever get to 0 on that one. There will never be any more violence. And I think it's a wonderful thought, but I just don't think it's very realistic. So where is the perpetrator violence within this list? There's no recommendation for how children should deal with someone who means them harm as it's happening. The 2007 No Violence Report comes a little closer in that it includes 3 pieces that I find fundamental for preventing violence towards children. And that is empower children, enhance individual capacities, and embed violence prevention in institutions and services. So, how do we do that? First, we need to understand a little bit about the needs, okay? We're gonna focus on that, empower children and enhance individual capabilities, on how we understand the needs of children. You know, it's funny, I find speaking in English so much more complicated than speaking in Hebrew, even though it's my mother tongue. You do not become bilingual, you become bi-illiterate. So we'll get through this. That way. Okay. Oh, missed one. There we go. So when you think about children and how they grow, okay, it's like a little pyramid here. There are steps growing up. The younger they are, the more dependent they are, and the less independence they have. And that's the way it should be. You know, we as parents or responsible adults in the community, our responsibility is to make sure children are safe. That's what we should do. Does everybody do it? No. There'll always be people who do bad things. There's a reason why I have an alarm on my car and an alarm on my house. So we know that there are people who will always choose to do bad. But as a 5 to 7-year-old, my dependence on adults is much greater. And certainly the known adults in my life is a much bigger circle. These are the people that take care of me, whether it's in school or in after school programs or at home, or, you know, uncles and aunts and grandparents who are all part of this education of the child. And as the kids grow older, the influence of these people is reduced at the same time that the independence is increased for kids. So the more independent, the older you get, the more independence you have, the more chance you have of meeting a larger group of known people, but also a larger group of unknown people who you are now interacting with and needing to get to know and negotiating relationships with. So the understanding where are my circles of influence when I'm working with children is very important in order to be able to design a program that works the best for them. In addition, you know, that who influences who. So at the very young years, your biggest influence are your parents. Well, in the very older years, your biggest influence are your peers. And that has to be taken into account also. So what we are looking at is how to design a immunization system for children, that each developmental stage deserves its own system of tools and things that work best for understanding that difference in independence and dependence. And we do that by having a whole bunch of topics that we deal with. So there's a great body of evidence that teaching kids tools to protect themselves from harm works, right? We know this. So a recent evaluation of the No Means No program in Kenya shows a 40% reduction in the incidence of rape for the girls who participated in the program. Programs like Your Moment of Truth for boys in Nairobi has shown to improve boys' regard for women and to encourage them to intervene when witnessing gender-based violence. And there are reports from Tanzania also showing great promise. And while these programs are in high-risk areas, there's no reason to assume that their model would not be effective in other communities. We in Israel have also been seeing amazing outcomes. And while the majority of our feedback is anecdotal, it keeps us all working as hard as we can to reach as many kids as possible. So what's being taught? The basics of our program are think, yell, run, fight, tell. 5 basic concepts that really need to be explored through every educational piece. We do them with the emphasis on different syllables as they go along. So when kids are younger, and we tried to figure out how would we represent that in a graph. So welcome to our graph. In the 5 to 7-year-old, we start with basics. So the basics, me and my body. And the reason why there's that nice little triangle there is to show that we start out loud. We start at 5 to 7-year-olds, we're very loud, me, my body, my right to decide about it. The older the kid gets, the less loud we have to be about that one, right? We you know, I'm not gonna go into a, you know, room of 17-year-olds and start, you know, my body, my right, my body, don't touch me, my body. That's not gonna work. So even though it's very important to have the concept all through, it's not the how loud the volume is on it is not necessarily the same. So just so you understand that the numbers next to all these things represent these topics that are taught in Tanzania. So they also have, you know, I go and look for research reports. There's a really nice research report on self-defense in Tanzania. And they have a list. Here's our 20 topics. Well, we cover all those topics. So can we say that our program is just as ethical, you know, efficient as the program in Tanzania? Well, it just could be. And maybe we should be doing the same, more of the same, and keep going because we know it works. So self-confidence, yell, use your voice. These are things we do at the same volume all the way through. Absolutely, how we talk about it changes, but the fact that we talk about that constantly and in a very strong voice goes throughout the ages. Clearly, sexual violence, we talk about a little bit in the beginning, appropriate for the age. As they get older, they get a little bit more. It gets louder as they become teenagers because it becomes more prevalent of an issue for them. So you can see when things come in, when things go out, and why it's so important that you're reinforcing this behavior, these tools, these basic, you know, I look at them as rights. It's my right to protect my body. Okay, how do I do that? And I think somehow we as a culture have stopped doing that correctly, specifically for girls, but even for boys. I mean, for girls, it's very clear that we have under-taught girls how to defend themselves. But it's not clear that all boys know what to do nowadays either. So I'm going to tell you a little bit. You have to have a story, right? I was told you have to tell a story. One of our instructors, who has raised her children with empowerment self-defense ever since the first one was born, just moved to a new city. And the first, 2 weeks of school, kindergartner was miserable, crying, doesn't want to go. It's not getting any better. Okay, we adjusted, we moved, new friends, new place. Absolutely miserable. And to the point where they had a little break and she was counting down the days in fear and trepidation to having to go back to kindergarten. So, okay, we'll wait a couple more days. We'll see how she adjusts. After the break, she's going back 1 day, 2 days, still miserable. And the mom was just about to go to the school and say, hey, what's going on? When her daughter woke up and came over to her and said, hi, Mom, let's go to school today. Everything's okay. Okay. Well, what changed? And this is her story.
ולאן זרקת אותם?
לחצר.
לחצר?
כן.
ואז מה קרה?
ואז הם התחילו עוד פעם, ואז אמרתי להם תגידו כמה שאתם רוצים ותתאמנו בדעת כדאי, ובפדל בזה ותשאירו לא להגיד.
כל הכבוד.
That's empowerment self-defense. That's what it's all about. The presence of mind to say, I can handle this. I can take care of this. I'm going to take those bad words. I'm going to throw them away. And I'm going to say, you can call me bad words, but I'm going to keep taking them and throwing them away and taking them and throwing them away. So if it works here, and we do it again, and we do it again, and we do it again, what chance do we have of helping kids grow up with their ability to say, hey, I know how to handle a situation. I know when something doesn't feel right. I know what to do about it. So that's part of why we teach the way we teach and how we try to get through all of the topics, scary, not fun things, but in a way that's empowering and gives kids the ability to make choice about bad situations. So one of my favorite, oh, you got to click, there's something to click on. Nope. There was supposed to be a hyperlink that said play somehow. All right. So you're going to make believe, because I gather we opened the wrong copy of this, whatever. It's been one of those days. So what you have in this picture is a very large golden retriever who is frolicking in the snow with a bunch of little golden retrievers. And they are play fighting. Okay, and while they're rolling and giggling and doing all their things, and the large golden retriever, and there's a reason why I'm calling this the large golden retriever, is not allowing the puppies to catch them, and running away and fighting back, and the puppies are jumping all over each other, and everybody's having a great time. And after watching it and everybody giggling, I usually say, well, you know, who is that large golden retriever? Is it the mom or the dad? Anybody got a guess? Well, most instances it's the mom. But the funny thing is, you know, I once showed this video and some guy shouted out from the audience, she's not letting them nurse. And I said, oh, great boundary setting. I will let you know when you can eat. It's not now. Playfully. So, and then I ask, well, can you tell the genders of the puppies by how they're behaving? You don't get to see how they're behaving right now, but could you guess from just looking at this bunch of puppies, which ones are male and which ones are female? I can promise you that by their behavior, you can't see the difference, okay? But for some reason, when we educate human puppies, we educate them differently. We allow boy puppies to, I mean, can you imagine a dog trainer who's now has a new litter saying to all the male puppies, oh, okay, go out, get dirty, you can go fight and play, and all the little girl puppies saying, no, just sit there and don't get your dress dirty. Now, that's not working, and it's not working for us either. And the reason, I have a dog, I'm a dog lover. I can tell you one thing about my dog. She is the sweetest thing. Don't ever try to take away her bone. That's it. So isn't that what I want for my daughter? Isn't that what I want for my son? I want them to know, hey, don't touch me when I don't want to. Don't try to take my bone. You know, this is what I'm an autonomous. Ooh, wow. What's that word? Autonomous? No, it's not autonomous. Being in this world, and I have a right to make decisions about my body. So many times I have parents, you know, say to me, well, that's all nice and fine, but they got to take a shower. So how do I deal with autonomy and parenting? You know, so, okay, my job is to teach you, you have to have some minimal amount of hygiene. That may only work until you're 16, and then I no longer have choice in the matter. But while I still have say over this, we now have to make a decision. Do you go shower by yourself, or do I take you to go shower? So whether or not you shower tonight is not necessarily negotiable depending on your age. But having being able to help your children learn how to make decisions and how to package things in a way that respects the fact that they have rights to make decisions. That's part of a good empowerment self-defense program. I think one of the special things, or one of the things we've been trying to develop over the last few years that for me is very important, is how to involve parents and other responsible adults in the community to be part of the solution. It's not always easy to find people who are willing to re-educate. Like, we were raised that there's a certain way to behave in a certain way. Well, you know what? Is it okay for, story, we gotta tell a story, right? Working with a bunch of parents, I had a mom say, oh, wow, yeah, no, it's great, I did that. I helped my son set a boundary. I let him do it. We were in the park and he had a bag of bamba and he didn't want to share it. And his friends were all going, oh, come on, come on, come on, come on. He really didn't want to share it. And I looked at him and I said, you know, it's your bag of bamba. You need to decide what you want, and that's what you are going to stand for. And he didn't share his bamba. And I was so proud of him for standing up for himself. And I said, you know, that's absolutely wonderful. I have a question. Would you have behaved the same way if it was your daughter? And she took a deep breath and she said, wow, I never thought about that. Probably not. Had it been my daughter, I probably would have said, oh, come on, sweetie, they're your friends, you know, be nice. Let them have some, you know, just a little bit. So, you know, we believe we don't do it, and yet we do. I think a lot of times we don't even see that we do it. And I think part of what Halev originally set out to do when we started being just women teaching women and girls martial arts was, how do we role model? How do we role model that girls can be tough? Girls can be karate instructors or judo instructors or play judo or do taekwondo. How do we do that in a way that doesn't feel like we are becoming men? You know, that we can still be women doing what we do and powerful in the way that we like to be powerful. How complicated is this? Well, actually, it's really kind of super complicated. It's not so simple to keep that balance and have people understand that that's an okay solution. And yet it does make a difference. You know, I'm pretty sure that if I ask a group of girls today, okay, what's the difference between soccer and basketball? Just about everybody could tell me that. Yeah, it's a good guess that if I asked what's the difference between soccer and basketball, they could tell me the difference. They asked me, it's the same thing. Two groups trying to put a ball into something, right? In something with a net, right? You know, they're just like trying to get a ball into something, you know, and whatever. They just keep passing it back and forth until they get it into something. So it's really the same thing, right? Just like judo and karate, same thing. You know, we all wear the same white pajamas. But if you ask boys, what's the difference between judo and karate, you may actually get an answer. They certainly can tell you what they are. And why is that? Is that because they're inherently boy things, or is it because we've educated them to believe that it's a boy thing? As a good driver, I know it's not part of my gender to be a bad one. You know, I don't think I need any other piece of anatomy in order to be a good driver. I can do it because I do it. And because I've never allowed anybody tell me I shouldn't be able to do that. And it's something we've missed in our education. It's something that's not happening in a way that makes sense for kids and for next generations. And if we're even talking about gender equality in any way, shape, or form, you know, it's funny. For the last 5 years, I've sat in the Committee for the Advancement of Women in the Knesset, and you know, I go to meetings every now and then, and the last report on the Madad Migdari, the gender Madad Migdari. Yeah, no, it's not statistics. It's the, there's a word for it. The gender rating, okay, of how, what? Yeah, fine, but there's a word in English. That helped me in Hebrew, that didn't help me in English. The rating of all of the statistics of women, you know, how much money they get paid, at what, you know, poverty, homelessness, violence, yada, 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 yada. And they calculated when, if we continue at the same rate, assuming that the rate will stay positive, okay, we're making a big assumption here. They calculated that if we stay at the same rate of change, of improving the lives of women, that we will reach gender parity by 2097. Not my children, not my grandchildren, not my great-grandchildren. That's got to change. And I have totally gone off script. So, think, yell, run, fight, tell. We're gonna go back here. Think, yell, run, fight. That's because I have friends in the audience now, so it's more fun this way. It doesn't necessarily, you know, it doesn't necessarily go in that circular pattern. Sometimes you don't have the time to think. You have to fight. So you have to run. So sometimes it may look like this: think, run, tell. Okay, and that's a choice. And sometimes it might look like this: fight, run, tell. The important part is the telling. Okay, and to me, I think that's one of the biggest pieces that's come out in this last year. You know, that with all that's going on in media and Weinstein and everybody and he who shall not be named and the hashtag Me Too, you know, these are all very important statements because they're about telling the stories. They're about saying we need to honor the person it happened to, accept their story, and not care about the person who perpetrated. Because up until now, that script has been flipped. It's always been about, well, you know, you misunderstood. It's not what he meant. He was, you know, he was a little drunk. No. Bad behavior should not be excused. And we don't put up with it anyplace else. You know, and we see the conversation happening over and over and again. I only hope that this conversation does not pass like a bad smell. You know how bad smells work, or strong smells. Let's not call it a bad smell, strong smell, okay? You walk into a room, there's a really strong smell, okay? Within a couple of seconds, you don't smell it anymore. It has nothing to do with the smell. It has to do with your brain. Your brain stops processing the smell. The smell doesn't go away. Your brain just says, okay, bad smell, I got to think about other things. And I'm afraid that that's what's going to happen with what's going on now if we don't kick this into some sort of real systemic change, all right? That all of this brouhaha on tell the stories and we gotta get it out there, and it's just we're going to get used to it, sort of like when Benny Sella ran away from the prison and everybody panicked. Half of you don't know that story because you were not old enough, but the serial rapist of Israel escaped from prison, and every woman in Israel went into an absolute panic, as if he was the only rapist in the entire world. And phones rang off the hook. So it was like a bad smell. And then all of a sudden he was put back in jail, and okay, well, we don't have to go to class, right? So no, don't let it be that. Let this be something that actually makes change, that makes us look at how we see what's going on and how we're educating our kids and the work that we do, how to make things better. So when we talk about working with kids, we're not talking about turning them into little ninjas. Those are ninjas. We like them. They work very hard to become ninjas. And they put a lot of time and energy and thought and practice into every little move that they make, and that's beautiful and wonderful. And I highly recommend it to anyone who has at least one free hour a week to do that. Kids need something a lot more practical. They need to learn how to get on the bike. They need to learn how to swim in the water. They need things that, okay, they may not become Michael Phelps, and that's okay, but everybody should learn how to swim. So the tools we teach are tools that should be, everybody should learn how to do them. You want to take it and master it, go for it. Fantastic, that's wonderful. But you should have the basics. Take the basics with you. So when we look for a program to bring into a program that, an institution that we're working with, what are we looking for in a self-defense program? What are the key pieces that we look for? So does it help kids access their strengths and not play up on fears? I can promise you that if the coach teaching your kid how to swim spent their whole time going, no, water's really dangerous, water's really dangerous, water's really dangerous, you would find a new teacher. Like, you don't want them to be petrified of water. You want them to be empowered to swim in a safe way. Same thing here. So access their strengths and not play up the fears. The world's a scary place. Well, yeah, we don't have to talk about that. The world is a scary place, but let's learn tools to deal with it. Are the skills relevant to the most common types of violence? Those little crazy chokes where you jump in the air and wrap your legs around somebody's neck, no, they don't happen in real life. So that might be fun for an art, for learning something high level, but that's not a practical tool. Do the skills that are being taught recognize a range of violence? So we teach kids to yell, "Go away now!" So that one day they'll be able to say, "Hey, I don't like when you talk to me like that." That's a range of skills. That one's important. This one's important. And everything in between is important. And how do I know what to use when? Range of skills for the ranges of violence. Does the class honor individual agency and choice? Come on, everybody's got to do 10 jumping jacks. I don't want no. Okay, if you do the jumping jacks, that's great. You'll get stronger. And if you don't want, you can watch for the moment, but I really like it if you join. Choice. If we're teaching them about boundary setting and respect and choice, then there's got to be some there too. And the honest truth is, when we hear stories, and I know, many of our instructors have heard stories like this, of teens who spent the entire time either half asleep or on their phones or half asleep on their phones. And then they come back and tell a story of how they used something that was taught in class that they never participated in, or at least I never thought they participated in it. Because that was their way of being able to absorb that information. They weren't at a place where they could be more active, but they actually learned something. And do we honor that? Do we respect that? And no, that doesn't mean that I have to give everybody the right to interrupt me when I'm trying to teach. I'm also allowed to have boundaries, and how do we make that work? So that's always good. Do the instructors have the training and experience necessary for working with this specific population? Super important. Do they take questions and concerns seriously? Are they willing to say, you know what, I don't know, I'll check for you. I never thought about it that way. And as a parent, I think, when you're interacting with an instructor, it's a very important piece of feedback. Wow, instructor says, okay, I don't know if Sally hit Tom. I'll check it out. let me see what I can do to figure out what happened that day. Or no, Zaya Klum, it was nothing. No, I want my concerns to be taken seriously, and I want my kids' concerns to be taken seriously. The third piece of what no violence suggested, not yet. Yeah, was embed violence prevention in institutions and services. So this would be a lovely, wonderful thing. It would be, but we get into a kind of stuck in a conundrum place because, well, in order to go into institutions, you need research. In order to get research, you need funding. In order to get funding, do the research, you need programs. So you need the programs in order to do the research, but you need the funding to do the research, and you need funding to go into the programs. And it doesn't really happen the way it's supposed to. So there is research. There's research out there. And the research shows that empowerment self-defense works. Whether that research is talking about adult women, the European Union Parliament put out a meta-analysis on 50 different pieces of research on violence prevention protocols for primary violence prevention protocols for violence against women. And their conclusion was, after reading through all of them, that the most efficient program is empowerment self-defense and preventing violence, and it is the most underfunded, pretty much not even a line on a budget when it comes to governments. And that's got to change. That's a policy change that has to happen. We also know that there's a lot of research that shows that the work with kids is actually doing the work it needs to be doing. There's a 40% reduction of rape among teenage girls in Kenya. And it's not just because it's Kenya. It's because it's teenage girls who are taking agency over their body and saying, don't touch me. I will fight back if I have to. And it's working. Why shouldn't we believe it'll work someplace else? And when we get to the place of scientific study where you have to do a control group and you have to look and you have to, there are so many programs that we have decided without even testing them that they work, and we don't know that they do. I'll give a good example. As a matter of fact, there's one that we know doesn't work because research just proved that it doesn't. And that is all of these sexual harassment programs going into offices and talking about sexual harassment and doing these little movies and, skits and whatever. And what they found is it not only does it not make it better, people are turning it into a joke. It's like, why are they making such a big deal over nothing? Well, then why are we doing those programs? Why are they the programs that are getting the funding? So how do we look at the programs that really actually make a difference and a lasting difference? And how do we use it to build this immunization system for kids where they get the right degree of knowledge and skills for each developmental stage so that we can keep them as safe as humanly possible as they grow up, as they step into relationships, intimate relationships, independence, and all the things that they need. We need to give them the tools they need to step boldly into those places. So we are building a rocket. And we are building a rocket based on the human resources that we know. We have experts in the field who know how to deliver these programs on a very high professional level. We've got the experience. We learn from the programs that we've done, and we get better all the time and are constantly looking for changes in culture. 10 years ago, 14 years ago, when we began, the internet was not as big a deal as it is today. It just wasn't. It was already a big deal. It was getting to be a bigger deal, but it didn't follow us into the bathroom. Now it's every place. Wherever we go, we've got the internet following us with conversations and what's going on. And it's affecting how our kids are getting information for good and for bad. And money is an important part of fuel for this rocket. And the goal is to launch this to change how we do community outreach, get some policy change out there, because the time has come. You know, I've said this kind of cynically, but yeah, maybe that's because it's cynically, that I raised 5 kids, for good, for bad. Yeah, you have to ask them about that. But I sent them to school to learn life skills. And yes, math is a life skill, but so is how to set boundaries, and so is how to protect themselves, and so is how to negotiate, and so is having self-esteem and feeling and self-confidence, and knowing how to use my words to solve problems and not my fists, but knowing that if I need to use my fists, then I am smart enough and empowered enough to know when I am okay doing that to save myself, that it's my right to make that decision, and that the world trusts me to take care of the only rocket ship that I've been given to soar through this life, and that's my body. And so schools, in Israel at least, teach 1 hour a week of life skills. Kids are there a lot more than that. Like, I mean, okay, math is also a life skill. As citizenship, ezrachut, or whatever, that's also a life skill. But so are all of these other things that are not being taken care of in the school system. And then how do we do that in a way that's professional? Because I can tell you from all the conversations that we've had in the Knesset that the last person who wants to have to teach about sex ed is their homeroom teacher. Like, that's not what she signed on for when she started teaching school, was to all of a sudden be thrown a whole bunch of topics that she or he doesn't feel comfortable teaching in a classroom setting. So how do we bring these tools, which to me are a basis for how to run and live a healthy life, a safe and healthy life, bring them in a professional manner into the institutions that really have the most time with our kids to educate them, so that they come out at the other end with the skills that they need to run safe and healthy lives and do their 5, degrees of math when they do their matriculation exams. That's great. But, it's funny, we talk about how important, science and technology and, maths and all those are important for high school students, which I totally agree with. And 1 in 5 kids is not getting to high school without becoming a victim of sexual assault. If we don't fix that problem, if we don't talk about how to give kids the tools they need to stop violence while it is happening, as it starts, as the grooming process starts, as the icky piece starts, as the why am I feeling like I can't talk about it piece starts, then we have a much lower chance of getting them to the finish line the way they should. And on that note, that I'm dumb. Are there any questions? Thank you. Whatever. Build a rocket. I did that. See, I got to the build a rocket. I got to the right last page. Any questions? Were there any questions out there? Is there anybody out there? Da, da, da. Oh my God, my mother was there. No, what? Chana wrote, Mom. I was like, ah! Oh man. 2097, yeah, right. Like, if that's not the scariest thing I ever heard. So what do you suggest is the next step? Oh my. Wow. I will go back to my default, which is if every one of us invests energy in working on their own Dalet Amot, their own 4 cubits, their own hand's breadth, everybody they touch in their lives, to just help change the message. Help change the message that self-defense is victim blaming. It's not. That women inherently can't fight back. They can, that these messages have to change. That's it. I don't know how to make it better than that. We do what we do and we keep doing it. It would be nice to not feel like we're marching in mud all the time, kind of stuck, going squash, squash in the same spot, but it's happening. Change is slow and short, but it's happening. Can we start a high school? Oh, wouldn't that be awesome? No, I know why you're asking, because your kids are about to get to high school, aren't they? 15 hours safety and the rest math. Yeah. No, I mean, really, if you think about it, I mean, not to knock, public education. It's taken a lot of people. No, it's taken a lot of people out of poverty, but there's something that's got to be fixed. There's fixing that has to happen. I believe the first thing that has to happen is they have to pay teachers more. No, absolutely. Whoop, 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 whoop. I mean, because if you really want to get the highest quality of people teaching your children, then you have to pay the same thing you're paying for your apps. Really very simple. And why teachers aren't making the same amount of money. I mean, it's interesting. My father, many years ago, my father asked me why I didn't feel a need for a career. And I said to him, well, if I was managing a $5 million portfolio as a just starting, private equity banker or whatever, not so bad, right? No, not so bad at all. I said, what, each of my kids aren't worth $1 million? So I think it depends on how we look at it, right? So if we look at the investing, I want my kids not just to be safe. I want them to be the best parents they can be. I want them to be the best adults that they can be. I want them to be the best citizens that they can be. I want them to have the tools they need to be those empowered, strong, wonderful. I think I did a pretty good job. I got to start working on grandchildren, right? But, that should be our goal. Our goal should be, how are we making sure? I asked the question in the first session, which unfortunately didn't get recorded, but it's been one of those days. But I asked the question, I did. I know I asked a question. I have the question. I am a grandmother. I get a 20% discount. It's after 9:30, right? Something about kids, right? Oh, good, God knows. No, so the question, right, there you go. Thank you, Esty. Yes. Right. So the woman who was here was representing the Office of Shlomo Yeled, the Child Protective Services, for lack of a better translation right now. And she was talking about how 73% of the violence against children is at the hands of a parent. And I said, well, and that violence, we know that violence can cause permanent damage in children. And I said, well, is there a connection between being victims of violence and becoming parents who are violent? And she said, it's not a must, it's not every child who's, of course not, right? But there's a higher prevalence, just like we know there's a higher prevalence that people who are sexually abused have a higher tendency to become abusers. And it's not that every person who's abused becomes an abuser, but that the people who are abusers tend to have to have been abused as children, okay? And I said, well, okay, so wouldn't it make sense then to teach kids how to be good parents? They may not be getting it from home, if those are the statistics. Is that something we need to figure out how to do? Well, okay, if we're teaching kids from the minute they're born, old enough to know the difference between this, I know that the second, somebody asked Ellen in the last session, what age should I start teaching my children this? Well, the second my kids started to learn how to crawl, I started teaching them not to put their fingers in outlets. Safety. Don't put your finger in the outlet. We do other things to cover the outlets, but we teach kids that things are dangerous. Don't crawl down the steps head first. Right? So we do that very, very early, but we undermine some of their natural tendencies to take care of themselves by not respecting the kid who doesn't want to be hugged. I have one nephew in the world, and as a baby, he didn't like being held. He just didn't. He certainly didn't like being held by somebody strange to him. And I would see him once every 3 developmental stages, because he lives in California and I live in Israel, so I barely ever got to see him. And I'm a very huggy person. And I needed to respect that. I needed to know that, okay, he doesn't want to be coochied and cuddled, and I just want to eat his legs and whatever it is. And, all the things I like doing with babies, I can't do with this child because he is clearly uncomfortable with that. And that's okay, So as an adult who has learned this, am I a better adult because I know how to negotiate? I know how to be sensitive to this. The big, oh, you don't like hugs, do you? Okay, can I just give you a virtual one? Yeah, okay. But if we teach our kids that, and if we teach our boys and our girls both pieces of boundaries, setting and respecting, won't we have a better world to begin with coming out the other end? Like, if that's the input, if the input is boundary setting, setting and respecting, well, those are tools that will get them through everything else along the way. Negotiation skills, de-escalation skills. And if somebody tries to knock my rocket off course, I'm going to knock their lights out. That's also okay. So I have the right to protect this. So, should we start a high school? Absolutely. Anything else? We have 6 more minutes, no more questions, and I love everybody. Have a good night.